Welcome back to the Marc Claire Show. And believe it or not, this is actually a historic episode. I'm not sure if you guys are even aware of that. This is the first time I've ever had two guests at one time on this program. I am joined today by Adam and Debra, co-hosts of the podcast, Debra Gets Red Pilled. Adam, Debra, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Two hosts at one time. That's what I'd do.
Two hosts, one pod. That's what we're going to roll with.
Yeah.
And but I'll let you guys eventually describe the premise of this show. But first, maybe Adam, you could start off just describing what is your relationship here with Debra, and maybe you could describe a little bit of what your own sort of worldview and maybe political outlook were. I know it's probably even evolved since then, but before meeting Debra, before deciding to do this show.
Yeah, so Debra is my mother-in-law. I'm married to her eldest daughter. And I think we've had the show, I can't even remember when we started. I think we're in our third year of the show. We've done 200 episodes or something like that. And when we started the show, I was in, it was when was the lockdowns real bad? The first summer of like real bad lockdowns, was that
Depends
21?
where you were. If you were like me in LA, they were for a long time.
Yeah. But we started it then. We started in August of the first summer of lockdowns. I can't remember what year that is. And
2020.
I was of the same political persuasion as you were when you were still on your old show. But I'm not there anymore either.
Fair enough. So maybe we'll get into a little bit of that. But Debra, why don't you also just describe a little bit where your sort of worldview was prior to meeting Adam, and maybe you could just kind of describe. Obviously it all worked out, but what were your first impressions of Adam when your daughter brought him home?
Oh, well, I just enjoyed him immediately. He's got a crazy sense of humor, and by the time they were engaged and then early marriage. I thought the world of him. Let's see, my political views have changed greatly. I was a dyed-in-the-wool, if that's the right expression, Democrat. Thought I was on the good guys team, and eventually came to have my eyes opened. I got red pilled. And so now I kind of have a basic mistrust of everything.
And hence we have a podcast title. So Adam, maybe you can describe a little bit. Do you remember a first time, before we even talk about doing this with Debra, do you have a particular moment of your own that you felt like you became red pilled? Or was it sort of just more of it? And maybe you can actually describe what that is, because a lot of people have different definitions of that as well. I've met people that just think it means you're like becoming a Republican or something.
Yeah, I had a real hard time with alcohol for like about half of my life, and then I got sober in 2012. And by the time the elections rolled around in 2016, my brain had kind of started working again. And I remember, I used to be in a labor union. I was a union iron worker, and I was a big Bernie guy when that in the lead up to the 2000 elections. And I remember when the super delegates happened with the Democratic primaries. Do you remember those?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first thing that really just like blew me away. It's like, wow, this is crazy, because Bernie Sanders is like winning these states primaries, and then like Hillary Clinton's coming away with more delegates because there's these super delegates who all work for the DNC, and I couldn't believe that was happening.
Was that just a kind of a realization of like, wait a minute, they didn't tell us about this part in school. They said you go and vote for the guy, and whoever gets the most, he wins the thing. And then this was like a realization that they kind of had to. I don't think it's normally talked about in the political discourse, because normally the most delegates go to the people that win. But in this case, they actually did have to utilize the super delegates. So it did become a topic of conversation. So was it for you just realizing there's a crack in this system? This isn't something they tell us about. Things are not what they seem.
Yeah, definitely. It just made me realize that I was kind of at the same place that Debra was when we started the show, that the left was good and the right was bad. I lived in Oakland and San Francisco for a long time, so I was just engulfed with all that. I was in 12-step programs there that are like heavily lean that way, and It was just what was always around me. And then I heard, as much as I'm not there now, I heard one of the early Dave Smith, Joe Rogan appearances, and kind of made me realize that there was other ways to look at things, and I went down that road, and it helped me get to where I am now. I have no regrets. I still like listening to a lot of those shows and a lot of those content creators and stuff like that. But at the same time, I started listening to Tinfoil Hat and Pro 777 and different stuff. So I was kind of becoming libertarian.
You fell into the pipeline.
And a paranoid.
The liberty to conspiracy pipeline.
Unhinged conspiracy theorist at the same time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when you guys first came together, that's interesting that you kind of had that same point of view that, the Democrats were the good guys, because that probably is a big factor in how you are able to relate to Debra and to relate to sort of the way she has evolved over time. So Debra, for you, do you recall a first moment, besides just liking Adam's personality and thinking he was a good fit for your daughter and all that, do you remember a moment where he said something, whether it was something political or something else off in the wild, where you kind of stood back and said, okay, this guy thinks a lot different than I do?
Let me see. I don't know if I can put my finger on an exact one, but especially in the political arena, I think we kind of avoided that a little bit. I know the election came up, the 2016 election came up, but I'm not really sure. When he started talking about, maybe we should do a podcast together, I was like, what is a podcast? I'd never even heard of it. So that's, I was kind of wet behind the ears. Is that? But I don't remember specifically what Adam might have said to make me think, he's got a different way of seeing things than I do.
Adam, for you, were there moments, obviously the podcast I didn't just come out of nowhere. Were there moments in your own interactions when you're first getting to know Debra through your wife, where you might say something or bring up something that you knew she didn't disagree with or maybe wasn't familiar with, and you might see, a little crack of interest? Like, what were the little signs that you had that said maybe we could actually do something with this?
Well, it's just the kind of cringy normal things that everybody does when they're going down that libertarian pipeline, like talking to people about democracy and things like that. And then I remember a really good one. We were at a wedding one time, and I started. Debra is a non-religious Saturday person, if you know what I mean. And
raised in the Jewish religion.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean, because I am exactly as well. I was raised pretty much a Saturday person, I guess. I like that. I like that phrase. I'm going to start using it.
Yeah. So she apparently didn't know what a bris was. She didn't know that there was...
I knew what a bris was. I didn't know your version.
She didn't... Well, that's not my version. She didn't know that a rabbi would suck the baby's little ding-dong when they were doing it.
There is a version of that from what I've heard. Yeah, I don't believe that's what Debra or I would have grown up seeing, but there is a version of it from what I've heard.
And I told her about it at a wedding, and she's like, no, that's not true. That doesn't happen. And then she told her husband about it, and he I saw this immense rage in his eyes. He got really mad at me. And then I did a simple Google search and found all these New York Times articles talking about little babies who'd gotten herpes from rabbis in Brooklyn. And,
nice casual wedding talk.
Yeah. Stuff like that.
Good wedding reception. I assume this
wasn't your own wedding.
No, it was some lesbian wedding. But
well, that actually does seem like an appropriate setting for that conversation somehow. So take us sort of, Adam, from the beginning of things. What actually inspired you to get up and turn this into a podcast, turn whatever conversations you were already sort of naturally having with Debra over the dinner table or whatnot, where the idea for the podcast itself come from?
I was just such a fan of podcasts. I had a really boring job that I hated, and I was able to listen to headphones most of the day. So I became a huge connoisseur of podcasts as soon as I found them in around 2015. And I always thought, I'm listening to all these conspiracy shows, and it's usually just 2 or 3 people in a room together agreeing with each other about a certain thing. And I thought, well, it would be super fun I was massively trolling Debra all the time, just like text messages, and I was sending her all these DMs on Instagram. And then I found out like years later that she had never even opened any of them because she didn't know what a DM was. And I thought, I just thought it would be a good show, something that seemed kind of original to do it. And we started out, and it was real clunky, and it's still pretty clunky sometimes, but we've had some good moments, and yeah.
I mean, it's part of the charm. It very much is, and sounds like, and is on very real conversations that you guys have, whether it's just between yourselves or whatever guests that you bring on. I'm curious, Debra, I know you kind of, said you had sort of a typical Democrat outlook before sort of going down this path a little bit. For you, I'm curious. I mean, you're raised, I believe, in you're from the San Francisco area. Is that correct?
Bay Area. Uh-huh.
So did you kind of grow up not seeing your viewpoint even as a viewpoint per se, but just as this is the right and correct true thing that we know, and all that other stuff people are saying are these weird, crazy fringe viewpoints that are somehow attacking the truth of what we know to be correct? Is that more? Because that's kind of what I get from a lot of people that grew up in places like that.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think the Bay Area was a little bit of a bubble, and maybe it still is, of, liberal Democrats who, were always for the underdog. That's, speaking for myself, that's kind of how I felt at the time, that we should be, giving everybody a handout, and, the Republican Party were the warmongers, and we were the peaceful peacekeepers, and I think pretty much I didn't really get a whole lot of other opinions growing up, even into early adulthood. I mean, everybody that I kind of was around was of the same opinion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, having lived in Los Angeles for almost 20 years, I can say I know exactly what you mean. All my opinions had to come from elsewhere, so to speak. So, and I know that you guys mentioned a lot of this conversation was starting to happen around like the 2016 range. So I'm curious for you, Debra, how much of your political viewpoint at that point in time, which is around the time I think you and Adam were having these sort of conversations, how much of your politics became consumed by and fueled by Trump rage?
Oh my goodness. I have a ton of Trump rage, and I still do, actually. I just dislike the person. So yeah, I was bound and determined to do, whatever I could to stop him from getting into office, which just boiled down to my voting for Hillary. That was, but I couldn't believe that we went that direction. I couldn't believe that.
What do you remember? I'm just curious your reaction that actual evening, because
I remember it really well.
It was one of the most fun nights of my life. I'm not gonna, I think for a lot of people, but not even because I was a Trump fan, but I think just like a lot of other people of our ilk, we just enjoyed the shade and the pure shade and fruit of the reactions. I
was with a group of women that I get together with once a year. Women that I lived in the dorm my freshman year of college. We've been doing this 50 years, and we were together. We were, on one of our weekend getaways, and we were all. There were 2 who voted for Trump, and the other 6 of us were all Democrats. And
I didn't know that. That's surprising to me.
Yeah, I was shocked that 2 of these women who I've been, so close with all these years, I was really shocked. But anyhow,
did you have a gut reaction, almost like, what's wrong with you guys when you heard that?
Kind of. One of them I understand a little bit better now. She had moved to Arizona with her then boyfriend, and he was a staunch Republican. The other one, I don't really know exactly how I would, file that away in my head. But we were at dinner and we decided we're all putting our cell phones face down in the middle of the table, and the person who picks it up first to look at it is buying dinner. So none of us looked until after the deed was done. And then it was just shock that he was elected.
Today's episode of the Marc Claire Show is sponsored by, right here, Fox & Sons, foxandsons.com, my favorite coffee brand. And I don't just say that because they're sponsors of the show. I say that because I get a 1 pound bag shipped to my house. The proof is right here. Every single month, I get my pound of Fox & Sons delivered right to my house. You should too. Of course, I don't expect you to just dive right in with no idea what you're getting into. I want you to go get yourself a sample bag. Go over to foxandsons.com, foxnsons.com. You can check out the Den Blend Dark, as is my preference, the Tanzanian Peaberry, Brazilian Honey Premp, a bunch of other flavors still to come. Steven's always mixing it up with new, fresh beans. The best part about this business, Steven started it to not only relive his love for sharing coffee with his father, but to teach his own sons about entrepreneurship. If that doesn't give you the warm and fuzzies, I don't know what will. Just kidding. Yes, I do. This coffee will. So head over to foxandsons.com, foxnsons.com. Use discount code MCS to get yourself 18% off your order. You're going to be coming back for more. Trust me. foxandsons.com, discount code MCS. Back to the show. Did it reframe? Because I think this almost could have been, I don't think a red pilling moment, but a something moment. Did it reframe your perception of our reality in any way? Because I think many people, the reaction was very different than just, oh, my person lost, this side one loss. It seemed like something so incomprehensible had happened that it actually did somewhat break some people's view of what was going on. And I that's kind of what I'm getting to is I wonder if somehow in the back of your mind that happening might have somewhat paved the way for the conversations with Adam. Not that they were about Trump, but just about the fact of things aren't exactly what they seem.
I can't say that it did, because I still thought our government was legit and had our best interest. So I can't say that I thought there was something squirrely going on, but yeah, that's changed a lot in the ensuing years.
Adam, we can go back to you for a bit here. What I'm curious, when you first started talking to Debra about politics, and you got some whatever indications that you could at least have a good conversation with her. It wasn't going to turn into a fight or what have you, which is how it really just used to be. So I think that hopefully can be the norm again for a lot of us someday. But what were some of the first sort of tactics that you used to sort of try to lead her along and show her your viewpoint without necessarily, or maybe sometimes you did, just bombarding her over the head with everything at once?
I think it was just pointing out contradictions on her side. And just to be honest, when that election happened in 2016, I wasn't where you were either at that point. I wasn't like laughing at the left. I think, I've been pretty honest about this before. Like after Bernie bent the knee and kissed the ring, I was really bummed out. And then my union told me to vote for Hillary Clinton, and I did it, So I was very, very shocked and surprised. And I was living in San Francisco at that time, and it was just it was crazy just because you are in such a bubble there. But as far as what the question was, what were some of the things that I started talking to her about politically, or
Yeah.
I can't remember, but it was just I was the kind of the question that you asked Debra about. When I saw the reaction of the left, who I thought was kind of my side, to another person winning, and that's when I started to really, really wake up and be like, I'm not a Trump guy, I'm not a Republican, but this is just crazy that it's becoming polarized like this. I would just talk about, I would bring up different things that politicians on the left had done that were exactly the same things that Trump was doing or worse, or like, those ones where you would say like, can you believe that Donald Trump said this? And then it's like really a quote from Gavin Newsom or something like that. It was just pointing out political inconsistencies to people on the left, thinking that was going to make them wake up and read Murray Rothbard.
That shows me exactly.
Like
that shows me you were definitely deep in your libertarian phase at that point, because that's what we love to do, is point out everybody's contradictions and then go, aha, and then just wait for them to, go read Man, Economy, and State. That's
exactly. But yeah, it was just a lot of stuff like that. And
our first controversial podcast, I think it was our second one, was on 9/11. And so I did do a little bit of research into that before we went on, and but was totally unprepared for.
And it wasn't anything crazy. It was pretty much just like the loose change arguments,
Yeah.
Did you, prior to that, have any, thoughts about 9/11 other than just, the standard, the bad guys attacked us, we launched some wars, maybe you didn't like the way Bush handled it, but it wasn't necessarily a conspiratorial issue for you?
Absolutely.
19 guys with box cutters.
All right, so let's dive into that one a little bit. What are some of the first things that you learned about 9/11 that made you kind of go, what? Because there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. The one thing that sticks out in my mind was it Cheney who went to the Pentagon and was?
No, it was Donald Rumsfeld.
Rumsfeld who went
who was
and
out
was
on
looking,
the lawn picking up trash.
Yeah. That kind of hit me. But
he was out on the lawn picking up trash. I don't even think I know that.
Yeah,
one.
The next day. So he makes that speech about all the money that's missing the day before, right?
Yep,
then the next day, whatever hits the Pentagon. I don't think it was planes. There's some people that do and say that there's footage of it. I've never seen it. But that day, Rumsfeld was out picking up debris on the lawn.
After the attack?
Yeah.
He was just picking up debris?
Yeah.
What's the conspiracy there, other than that it sounds weird as hell?
Looking for something.
I don't know what he's doing, but he was out there. Yeah. He was out there.
He's just helping out. He's just, he's getting his volunteer hours in, his community service hours. Let's not just gloss over that though, because that's, even in conspiracy realms, I don't think it gets focused on maybe as much as it should. And look, I've talked to people too that think, there was a plane and a lot of the evidence, and we're not talking about the two towers, by the way, this is just about the Pentagon, but still, I really feel like I would have seen a lot of footage of a plane, or some footage, or any footage of a plane, and still to this day, the only piece of footage that's come out from the Pentagon is that one, 2 frames that shows something,
an explosion, right?
Something going. It shows like
Ryan
something.
Dawson and Scott Horton will tell you all day that a plane hit it and that there's footage of it.
Yeah, so let's go into that. Why not? Because that's the one thing that
those two guys will also say that office furniture can make a building fall down.
All right, Debra. So what, along the things we're talking about here, are these things that you're learning as you're doing the episode or as you're preparing to do the episode, and what is going through your mind as you're hitting up against some of these very odd occurrences on what you prior to that had believed was just a very straightforward yet horrible event?
Well, the thing that kind of turned my mind around was the structural engineering and all the reports that came out from the American Association of Architects, there was some organization that was like
Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Thank you.
I had DVDs from them at one point in like, I want to say 2003, 2004. I couldn't even tell you how I got them, but I don't know if people are, feel like I got some on the Venice Boardwalk in LA, like people just handing out conspiracy DVDs. Those were the days.
Yeah.
But it was that kind of just opened my eyes that, things just didn't happen the way they said they did, because it's physically impossible. The physics just don't add up. It couldn't have happened the way it happened. And then, it was years later that we started talking about Building 7. I didn't even know about Building 7. And that just kind of cemented. I mean, years had passed, but that really cemented it. Because sometimes the truth, but you just don't want to know it. You just can't. Your mind just doesn't want to accept it. And I think, I lived in, I think I used to tell Adam that I had a foot in both worlds for a long time.
Like the normie world and the wild and crazy conspiracy world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would you say you still have a foot in both, or is one side falling into one or the other?
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely leaning away from my former beliefs.
Well, so at the end of the day now, so what do you now believe about 9/11? Obviously, you believe it's not exactly what you were told, but have you, because I'll be honest, I don't even have a per se 100% here's exactly what happened conclusion. I just can say when there's 72 things that are just make no sense, then when there's smoke, there's fire, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't say that I have done my own research to, decide for myself, because I'm not a deep diver like that. But I definitely.
She told me last week that the Jews did it.
I did.
The term is Saturday people.
Yeah.
Or Iroquois.
No, but yeah. So I definitely do not buy what they're selling.
Well, it's actually an interesting topic to get into, because I do feel like 9/11 is a very interesting one, because like you said, there are people in the libertarian world that will discuss it in sort of the Ron Paul manner, as a foreign policy talking point, and as sort of a discussion about blowback and non-aggression principle and all this stuff. And even to this day, I'll find myself generally nodding along when I hear these arguments, because yeah, I agree, there probably is blowback, and that probably is responsible for a lot of ill feelings in certain areas and terrorist and recruiting of terrorists. I'm sure that is true. At the same time, look at that, and how can we just all act like that is just what happened? And that it is one of those strange things. I think it's actually one of the things that is an example that comes up in my mind a lot of why I sort of veered away from just looking at politics on the surface level and talking about it that way. Because I looked around and realized libertarians are out here with their principles, having all these conversations, and then acting like every single event is exactly as it was described in the media and the textbooks or the official narratives. And that just didn't make any sense to me, how you could understand so much, but then act like so much of what you're told is just, baseline reality.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. And, over the past, 3-4 years, we saw when it came down to it, when it came down for libertarians to do libertarian stuff, a lot of them chose not to, and that's kind of what drove me the opposite way. But those 2008 debates with the Ron Paul moment with Giuliani, I mean, that's how can you see that and not resonate with that and be okay, yeah,
I still get out of my chair and clap when I see that clip. So
yeah, all us ex-libertarian guys still give Ron Paul the pass.
Yeah, no, Ron Paul always gets the pass. So we all agreed on that at the meeting. Debra, so you mentioned 9/11. So while we're starting to get into conspiracy land a bit, are there any other, whether it's a political idea or more of a conspiracy angle, are there any other sort of mind-blowing topics that Adam has introduced you to that really change your perspective in sort of a 180-degree way from whatever you believed about it before?
Well, I still don't think this is what you're asking, but flat Earth, I can't accept that one.
She gives the opposite answer. She's like, no, I'll tell you the one I'm totally out on, and that's flat.
I don't believe her on that, because David Weiss sent her the Flat Earth app, and she was watching it every day. And she had to uninstall it from her phone because it was working too good.
Have you two done a full Flat Earth deep dive together?
Yeah, we've done
not a deep. I mean, we had a few different.
It's
come up on a few different episodes, but then early on in the show, when Dave Weiss was doing kind of the rounds, he came on our show, and she had never been presented with any of that stuff before. I love it, and it was pretty cool to see that she didn't. Debra does not get offended and do the whole thing like my mom would do. If you even broached any of these topics, she'll listen and be like, wow, that's really crazy. I never thought of it that way. I don't know what to think. But I know if you want to get into one with her that totally worked on her is the moon landing. We had Alex Stein on, pre-famous Alex Stein, to do a really fun moon landing episode, and then we've had Bart Sabrell on twice.
Oh, nice!
Yeah.
So I've wanted to get him on, so I'll need to get the contact.
He's a fun guy to have. Moon Man, his most recent book is a great book, and definitely his documentary is A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. Are great. And if you listen to Moon Man or any of that stuff or read it, and I mean the moon landing for me is my litmus test. Like I know guys that are like flat Earth is my litmus test for like if
that's a pretty tough litmus test. I mean, you're not going to get a lot on your side if you're going to make that your litmus test. Can we even talk about this kind of test?
Yeah, but for me, it's the moon landing. I don't, if anybody in our world has been presented with just the basics of it, I don't see any way that you could just the whole like we erased the tapes on accident.
Yeah.
And then
we lost the plans.
And seeing that Don Pettis is the spokesperson for NASA. I mean, that's them massively trolling us.
Literally, I mean, I'm not trying to be offensive to anyone who is, but I also don't really care. Literally, they got a retarded guy to come be the spokesman of NASA. And this is exactly what is going on in real life right now.
There's no doubt in my mind that
it is like a joke.
They put Don Pettit in a dark room with a TV screen in there that might be like curved or something to look like a windshield, and told him that he went to the moon, and I think you're the International Space Station, and he believes it.
Oh, that's what I wonder too, because a lot of people will say, "You telling me all these astronauts are lying?" And first of all, there's not that many astronauts ever, so maybe. But besides that, I've also thought, well, maybe they go and do stuff. Maybe they get sent into something, and maybe it goes somewhere.
I think all the Apollo astronauts are lying, but I think that there's like all those people in the control room now, all the autistic computer nerds that they hire. I think they like are watching video games and thinking that it's the real thing.
Sure. Well, did you guys see a more recent version of this that I think is even, I don't know if I could say more ridiculous than the moon landing, but it's pretty fucking ridiculous. It was this thing where they said they were going to shoot a missile at an asteroid, and they broadcast this on CNN. If I had the time, I'd try to find the video, but it'd probably be too distracting from the show. But they broadcast it on CNN, and it's just this very obviously animated like asteroid that the camera's getting closer and closer, and then it explodes, and they hit the asteroid, and then all the nerds in NASA are cheering and high-fiving.
High fives.
And my point being, I agree. I think those nerds are really, really think they just did something amazing. They are put in front of their computer, they punch in their numbers, they move the thing, and the thing goes boom, and then they cheer. That in no way is evidence that any that cartoon I just saw was an asteroid.
Yeah. I had a chance to talk to some guy who's some subcontractor or something for NASA for some, I don't even know what he does, but it was on a mutual friend of ours, like private Patreon Zoom chat that he does once a month. And this guy was saying, our friend asked him if he believed that the moon landing was real, and he said yeah. And I just asked him the basics, the basics, like what happened to the tapes, why can't we do it anymore? And he's like, well, the guys, he gave me the Bill Nye excuse, which is it would be harder to forge all the paperwork than it would to be actually go to the moon.
Well, you've seen the photo of the they say that this is the girl that, wrote the code, and it's just this tiny, nerdy librarian chick next to a stack of papers. They literally say this is the code from the moon landing, and we have to rewrite this.
Yeah. And then he said the guys in the 60s were like so brilliant, and they were just running so fast and loose that they weren't even recording this stuff. So it can't be recreated.
These guys are so smart. They're doing so math in their minds.
What we have now. Yeah.
They don't need to write it down.
And that was the explanation of someone that works at NASA.
Wow. So Debra, I take it then you're fully moon pilled then?
I am.
Okay. So
yeah, sorry to say.
I'm curious then, in your own normal life, where I assume you still interact with many people who are like you are and were, what have you. Have you ever encountered a time when something like that, whether it's the moon landing or 9/11, comes up that you've been brave enough to say something different than you might have years ago? Or do you still kind of keep this thing something you just do with Adam?
A little of both. Earlier on, I did talk about it quite a bit, and some people were not receptive. Some people thought I was a little bit crazy, and so I refrained from talking to those people about these topics. But most people think that it's just out of the realm.
What about just even on the, not necessarily the wild conspiracy realm, but has even just your maybe evolving worldview and evolving political view, has that seeped its way into the conversations at all that you have?
Yeah, it has. More about, our politics, U.S. politics. That there are no good guys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What would you say then because I don't think we fully addressed this in the beginning where we were talking about the red pilled concept, but now that, the show is called Debra Gets Red Pilled, I think you would probably call yourself red pilled, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have a certain set of beliefs. And this is something I just describe to people because not everybody knows. Some people encounter this phrase for the first time. You may have never heard the phrase before meeting Adam. I'm not sure, but what would you describe meaning now that you consider yourself red pilled? What does that actually mean? It obviously doesn't mean to you any particular political belief.
It means that you don't take at face value anything that the media or tells you. That there's some hidden agenda, and it may be huge, it may not be huge, but you can't take anything at face value.
I think her crumbling perception of what the mainstream media portrays is the biggest takeaway from the whole show so far.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be, I loved Don Lemon, and I just loved him.
We're laughing with you, not at you. Don't worry.
I'm laughing too.
Yeah, she was a big Chris Cuomo guy.
Oh, yeah.
And remember when his brother was in the presidential race for a minute, she thought he was really good. She thought he was the one. He was going to be the one to take down Trump. And then she thought it was going to be Bloomberg also, but it didn't really pan out.
Whoever thought it would be Biden. So
yeah, nobody thought it would be Biden,
and perhaps nobody still does. So we're on YouTube, but I don't care about that stuff, and I'm still strikeless on the new show, so I'm willing to be a little frisky. So Debra, speaking of that of Trump no longer being in office, what do you think about all that? I don't know how else to phrase it. What do you think about all that? How all that went down? And
well, I
know you don't like him, and so that's probably maybe good that he's not there no matter what. If you don't like him, you don't like him. But I'm curious how your new perspective has. Yeah,
I still am not been shown anything to make me believe that there was not an insurrection.
Oh, we jumped right to J6, didn't we? You're saying it's okay. There might have been a couple negatives there. Are you saying you believe? So do you believe that there was or was not?
I believe there was.
You believe there was? Okay, interesting.
I believe there was a group of people who wanted to do some damage. Yeah.
I agree. There was a group of people that wanted to do some damage. We might just disagree on who they were. Adam, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, taking at face value that there was a totally organic group of people that wanted to go in and break windows on a.
Oh, there is a group of people. They just mostly work for the FBI.
Yeah, it was inorganic is what I took away from it. Yeah, I don't. I think if people were trying to overthrow the government, there would have been some weapons involved on the side of the people that were trying to do the so-called insurrection. I don't believe that, we got into a big fight with somebody that used to be one of our friends who's not anymore on the show because they thought that the sentence that Joe Biggs got for breaking some windows wasn't enough.
So, okay. So Debra, do you have any thoughts about, have you seen like a lot of the judgments coming down with people related to that event? Do you think that those judgments are just? Have you seen any that you think like, even if I think something was going on here, maybe that doesn't seem right? Because there are actually people now that have been sent to jail that weren't even there. So I'm just curious how you view all of that.
Well, again, it's our government telling us, or at least one faction of the government, the Democratic side, telling us this is what happened and this is what they deserve. So I don't trust that 100%. I don't trust it, hardly at all. But I haven't seen anything.
But what do you think when all this video comes out, like when Tucker Carlson got all those tapes? Showed a small fraction of them on the air, and then they were forced to release people like the QAnon shaman from prison because it just showed him walking around peacefully into
a building he was let into.
Yeah, with the Capitol Police who were like giving him pretty much a guided tour and unlocking doors for him and stuff like that.
Well, I have to confess that I hadn't seen any of that stuff, and maybe it's because I'm not watching the right shows, but I don't know about that stuff.
Yeah, it's all out there. It's I think it's still crazy that people have been convicted for not being there. It's weird too. I don't know that we're talking about this guy from the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio wasn't even there, but I thought that guy was it came out that guy was a Fed as well a couple years ago. So,
really?
I mean, maybe. Yeah, nothing would surprise me on this stuff. But I mean, that's the thing. And I'm sure this is something that has come up, not just looking at 9/11, Oklahoma City. I know you guys talked about that before. I mean, everywhere you go, you see this FBI involvement or Fed involvement of different organizations. So does that given you any skepticism over something like January 6th? Maybe you think there were bad actors that wanted to do something there, but do you catch any of the same smell that you catch from some of this other stuff?
Yeah, I have. Yeah,
we're breaking her down.
It's not that I, have any firm, hard feelings about it, but I just hadn't seen the other side of it at all.
All right. Well, we don't need to nail it down today. Maybe it's something you and Adam can dive into a little bit more on a future episode. Have you guys ever gotten into like combat over? Obviously, you came from different perspectives and disagree on a lot of things, but has there been any particular issue that has been harder to get over a hump with, or are there particular viewpoints, Debra, that you've kind of held on to that Adam hasn't been able to change you? Whether it's like, I'm just tossing out ideas, guns, abortion, whatever it may be. Feel free to pick one.
Oh, yeah.
COVID.
Ooh, okay.
Well, he just mentioned guns as well, so that's another one.
Guns.
Guns is a tough one for everybody, I think.
That's a hard one for me, for sure. Guns.
Is it because I'm guessing you've talked about it in the lines of, individual rights and sort of the way that Adam was kind of framing things from the libertarian viewpoint. Is it that you do you see his viewpoint and sort of like agree with it philosophically, but it's just too hard of a bridge to cross because it's scary to you kind of thing?
It's just so foreign to me. I wasn't, I have no experience with them whatsoever. And so, I just kind of gravitate towards, if I had one, they would use it on me.
That is what I hear a lot from women.
Defend myself, it would be used against me. So, and I understand, Adam has, gone into, he's had a lot of training and he understands and he learns a lot about it. And so he has a much different, perspective than I do. But to me, they're scary things.
Adam, have you taken Debra to the range yet?
No. I live out in the woods.
Or you don't need a range, where you are. You can just invite her over.
If she ever wanted to while we were here, I would love to. I've got a Ruger 1022 by the back door. That's like shooting a BB gun, Debra. Maybe we could start out there. Next thing you know, you'll be a NRA range instructor, who knows?
Well, I know you can show her, but I will say, like, sometimes those NRA classes are pretty good at helping people that aren't familiar with it, because they'll go there and you'll see another woman your age, and you'll see another, you see people that you wouldn't have thought are going to be handling guns, and they're all in the class with you. So I have seen that kind of help people.
Yeah, my
before.
wife's done those.
Yeah.
So I used to belong to a rifle club when we still lived in the suburbs, and my wife went to one of those all women NRA hosted, week-long classes.
Oh, wow. Week-long class. That's intense.
Just like a couple hours every night.
Gotcha. I'm curious, Adam, the premise of the show is you pulling Debra along in a certain direction and red pilling her. But I'm curious, in all this time and all these years of your interactions with her now, is there anything that Debra has changed about you, or anything that you've taken away from Debra's approach to things?
For a long time, I wanted to do, a couple people suggested this to me, like people would DM me and be like, you need to do a reverse episode where Debra blue pills you on a topic. I definitely see her perspective on a lot of things, and that on a lot of stuff, it's maybe, better to be uninformed. I like doing all this research and figuring stuff out and listening to crazy ideas. But I think the biggest takeaway that I've had over 200 episodes, most of them with guests who make the rounds on other podcasts and stuff like that, is that I'm a pretty good judge of character, and I can pretty easily tell that there's a lot of people in this world who are full of it. There's a lot of stuff that I don't believe in anymore, even if I wanted to, a whole bunch. And I can just smell bullshit really, really easily now. And there's a lot of stuff that I don't even care about anymore. So I see.
Is one of those things convincing people to be libertarians?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, like seeing when it was time to be libertarians, when this whole thing started, there's, people that we've mentioned on earlier in the show who are supposed to be the one who's right about absolutely everything. And they were screaming from the mountaintops how people need to wear masks and stay inside, even if it shouldn't be mandated by the government, but people still need to do this type of thing. And it's just like, I saw people like that I looked up to doing it, and it was such a big turnoff that when the chips were down and when it was time to do it, that those who talked all about it before and then didn't act.
I think that yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that's it. And then just transitioning into trying to get out of the materialistic world and see things like more spiritually, and that changed my views a lot, and that happened probably a couple years into COVID. So
interesting. Yeah, and going back to COVID, because I think this is where I started to see some of the flaws in libertarianism. And again, it's not, I have no rational criticism of the logic of it, or the logic of the non-aggression principle, or the logic of Austrian economics of it. I think that the libertarians have come to obsess so much about consent, or whether, if it's the government's not doing it, it's fine. And that's how you get a bunch of libertarians that can be advocating a bunch of what I think is still horrible shit, even if the government doesn't mandate it, whether it's all the stuff we saw a few years ago, masking, jabbing, whatever it may be, defending the thing, but saying as long as the government isn't the one doing it, it's fine. And you see the effect of that in society, because everything that was being moved with COVID was moved by humans being propagandized and humans believing things. And whether the government told them to do it, I found that was even irrelevant, because in Los Angeles, they would remove mask mandates and people would complain about it. I would have friends that would be complaining that they're worried they're removing the mask mandate too early. So it's I think a lot more moved by the people. And when we're just focused on the government aspect of it, we're missing a lot of the boat there. And I'm curious, Debra, too, because I think when you and Adam started having these conversations, he was pulling you more in the libertarian direction. But now, someone like me, he's kind of gone through libertarianism, not really rejected it per se. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but just gone through it and seen that there's more to it than that. I think that's the way I would see things anyway. And I'm curious if you've seen any of that along his growth along similar lines.
That's a tough one. Well, he's always evolving. He's, I would say, you have been in your life, you've been a searcher, and you've gone through a couple of different phases. This is, an outside looking in. And so I've seen some softening on some of your ideas. I can't come up with any.
Is it the ideas or the approach? Because I think that's what changed about me the most. It's not necessarily that I think my background ideas are different. It's about what I care to prioritize and what I care to spend my time convincing people of.
Yeah, probably more of that. Would you say, Eric? Would you say, Adam?
I think I got to the point where I realized what was important in life, and it wasn't trying to convince people to be like me. Mm-hmm.
Which is so hard for the libertarians, because that's all we have. Like, we're not going to win office. So all we can do is convince other people to believe the same thing, and then that's the victory.
Tell people that we're right, without any risk involved. But I mean, the biggest wake up for me was we got involved during the lockdowns. We started doing like freedom cell stuff. You remember freedom cells, John Bush's thing?
Yep.
And we were doing it in Portland, Oregon, and of course it got taken over by like urine drinking hippies and Antifa eventually.
As these things tend to happen.
Yeah. What the great thing about it was that I got to actually meet other people who claim to be anarcho-capitalists out in the wild. I went to freedom festivals.
That'll do it.
I grew up I'm from the exact same subculture as Buck Johnson and Father Turbo Qualls, who have talked about it on your show before. And so when I go to a freedom festival for the first time and it looks like the parking lot of a Fish concert, I am turned off, and I'm like, these are not my people. This isn't what I want to do. I met a whole bunch of people who talked about, we need to get out of the cities, we need to homestead, all this stuff like that. And none of them, the people that I met, probably two other couples, my wife and I met two other couples that actually did it. We did it. And then it's just full of a bunch of people that want to smoke pot and spin around in circles. And like literally spin in circles while listening to
this is not a metaphor. This is what they're doing.
Yeah.
Around the campfire.
And, it just made me realize that the people that preach all this stuff, nobody does any of it. Nobody, I don't want to live in a van. I don't want to drive around, and I don't have the money for my parents to do that, which is mostly what people are doing that do that. I think that HBO documentary about the anarchists about Anarchapulco was super accurate, and I think it's a great portrayal of that whole scene. And it just, that whole thing made me realize that just because people might have some of the same beliefs as me, or just because people don't want to wear masks or something like that, it doesn't mean that they're my people. My wife and I got out of the city. We live out in the woods. And I was lucky enough to be able to leave the job that I hated. And to tell you the truth, when you get out here, the most black-pilled people I meet live in apartments in cities and have nothing beyond the material of the
no wonder
world.
they're black-pilled.
Yeah. And I live out in the woods, and I work on a farm all day, and I go to Orthodox church every Sunday, and I'm living a good life, and that's how my life has changed, because I was able to get out there and meet people and find the people that I like, and realize that the ones, just because we shared some materialistic beliefs in common, doesn't mean that they're my people. I don't know if that was an answer to any question or if I just rambled too much, but
yeah. Well, you mentioned I assume you're referring to Orthodox Christianity when you talk about the worldview.
I go to the Sunday Orthodox. Is
that how new? Yeah, the Sunday. You're a Sunday person. How recent is that transformation for you? Is that something that's happened in the last couple of years?
Yeah, I was baptized last Pascha, which is what we call Easter, and so I'm in my first year of being a full member of the church. I did 9 months of catechism, which is classes where you learn about theology and stuff like that leading up to it. Before that.
So here's the question. Go ahead.
March or April or May will be 2 years that I've been going to liturgies on Sundays.
So Debra, you're raised a Saturday person. Was is your daughter and Adam's wife, or is she still a Saturday person, or was this, are you doing this?
Never was. No,
okay.
my husband is Catholic, and we just kind of threw our hands up and
let her be whatever. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. That's a good approach. Cool. So, I'm curious, as you've seen Adam's evolution in political issues and that whatnot, have you noticed, or what have you noticed, I guess, about his change on the religious end? Has that rubbed off on you in any way? Not that I think you're gonna, not be a Saturday person anymore, but I'm just curious if you've just gleaned anything from that, just as you have from his evolution in politics and whatnot.
Just that he has found peace. That is very, very obvious to see, that this has brought him a sense of peace that I don't think you had since I've known you.
Well, that's the fact that you can notice that makes me happy. So.
Awesome. I mean, I'm curious too. So, I mean, you kind of said you're more, it sounded like to me, raised more like culturally Jewish and not super, super religious. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Has seeing that transformation in Adam, I'm not asking if it wants to make you be a Christian, but has it piqued your interest in taking religion more seriously or looking into it anymore? Or are you just kind of just happy for him kind of thing?
Well, it's a little bit more than that. It's, for the longest time, I would never say that I would pray because it felt like if somebody was sick and you want to say, oh, I'm sending you prayers, or I'm sending you good thoughts. I would never say I'm sending you prayers, because it felt hypocritical to me, because I was removed from any religious beliefs at all by my choice. And so now I'm I'm being touched when Adam says grace before a meal. I'm touched. Where maybe I would have rolled my eyes before.
Mm-hmm.
So So I don't know if that answers the question, but
it does. It absolutely does, and that is something. For sure. I mean, I think my wife and I have had similar conversations where we'll hear somebody make a comment or something like that, or say a prayer or something. And sure, maybe like she or I aren't like in that same place. We don't say the same prayers or do those same practices because we haven't gotten to that place, but we're in a place where we'll say like, oh, I just realized I think that's really nice now. And a few years ago, I might have been like, oh, okay. So I exactly know what you mean there.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder how much being raised Jewish, but not really, Saturday, but not really, plays a part in that, because I think there is a common thread. I'm not saying all Jews, but me, you, and others I've met are very often raised essentially as atheists, even though we might go to a service, even though we might go to a thing at some point. It's not really driven home in the reality around us besides that. And at least that's how it was for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. My family made me go to religious school until I was confirmed at 15. And, we celebrated all the Jewish holidays with my extended family. But I went to a school where there was it was, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant all the way. There were a few Jewish families, but I think one Black family and maybe a handful of Asian families. And I resented being Jewish because I was other. Yeah, I really did. I mean, having to miss school on the high holidays was, nobody says they'd rather be in school. I wanted to be in school, not because I was,
because people know you're out for the Jewish holiday, so it makes you a thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. Did you ever get her made fun of for being Jewish? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I killed Christ.
Yeah. Oh, we've all heard that. We all know that one.
Yeah.
People always forget what the Jewish kids go through. All right. Everybody knows. Okay. Everybody knows, because even if you don't look like it, they know who's not there on those certain days every year.
Absolutely.
And people catch on pretty quick.
Yeah.
There's a lot more I want to dive into you guys with, but I think I got to just tease the audience there and save this for the smoke-filled room. So some of the stuff we touched on, I want to dive a little deeper on. But before I let you guys go, before we jump into the smoke-filled room, Adam or Debra, either one of you, I'll let you kind of describe kind of what, Adam, you can give us kind of the rundown of all the places to find the show. But I just want to hear from maybe both of you where you plan to take the show from here on out. Because it's certainly, I'd say it's a pretty different show than it was when you guys first started. So I'm curious what you're doing with it right now and kind of where you see it going.
Yeah, so I have 100% full control of the show. Debra is just along for the ride. And because of my religious conversion, we have stopped doing a lot of we don't do any woo-woo spiritual stuff on the show. I'm really into parapolitics, 90s conspiracies, PatCon stuff. We just had a great episode with Richard Booth from the Libertarian Institute on the Oklahoma City bombing. And, that was episode 204. And I was really, really happy with the way it came out. It's one of my favorite episodes that we've ever done. And I'd just like to keep going down that line, parapolitics and, deep research, finding people that are doing Twitter threads and getting people that aren't, famous ones that do the rounds on all this conspiracy shows on. So if anybody in the audience knows some cool stuff about that kind of thing, OKC, Ruby Ridge, what was going on in the 80s, JFK, anything like that, let us know. We'd love to have you on. We'd love to talk to you. And we're just going to keep chasing it. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. Debra, any last words? Any advice to anybody who, like Adam, may have a blue-pilled family member that they'd like to crack the ice with, so to speak?
No, you'd have to talk to Adam about that one, because he has done it without.
Well, you gotta know what worked, though. It seems to have worked.
His patience. He's definitely patient with me because I'm the first to admit it. I am not a deep diver. I am really never, ever would have dreamed that he could convince me to do this with him. And now here we are 200 episodes later and still doing it. We went through some different phases. We did a lot of, like Dog Man and
Cryptid stuff.
Cryptid stuff. Thank you. And we did a lot of serial killer stuff for a while. I think that's probably too dark for you nowadays.
No,
But
I love that goes along with everything. That
No,
we do.
I
We
love
did a bunch
serial
of-
killer stuff.
We did a bunch of program to kill stuff and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
It all ties in, and maybe we'll talk about some of these topics in the smoke-filled room. But guys, I had a blast talking to you guys, and I
Thank you
really,
so
really
much.
do love the show. I really love hearing your interactions, and it's so fun to just hear someone sort of get their mind blown or really think about things deeply in real time, and that's something you get to hear all the time listening to the show. So keep up the great work, and thanks
thank
for
you
coming
so
on my
much.
show.
thanks, guys.